All right, let's jump right in, ready for a deep dive into a debate that never seems to cool down. Creationism versus evolution.
Yeah, it's a big one for sure.
We've got excerpts from 8 different YouTube videos, and it's a real mix. Scientists, religious leaders, even a comedian chiming in.
Oh, wow, a comedian. I'm intrigued.
We're not picking sides today, though. We're going to unpack the core arguments from both sides.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll dig into those examples and those intriguing details that make this whole debate so captivating.
You know, even if you think you've heard it all before, I bet you'll find something new here.
Okay, so starting with the creationist perspective, I've heard some people believe the Grand Canyon is actually evidence of a global flood. Is that right?
Yeah, you heard right. That's a key part of young Earth creationism, which takes the book of Genesis very literally.
Okay.
And they believe the Earth is only about 6,000 years old.
6,000 years. That's a very different timeline than what you usually hear from scientists.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And understand this viewpoint, it helps to look at the arguments they make. Like in one of our sources, Ken Ham talks about his experience at the Grand Canyon with a park ranger.
Okay.
The ranger, he explained the canyon's formation as, a long time and a little bit of water, but Ham sees it totally different.
He sees it as a lot of water and a little bit of time.
Right. He believes those huge layers of rock were laid down quickly during a massive global flood.
Okay.
And the canyon itself, well, he thinks that was carved out as the floodwaters went down.
Wow, so he's kind of flipping the typical geological timescale on its head.
Yeah, he is. And he uses things like, a fossilized fish caught in the act of eating another fish.
Oh, wow.
To back up his view, he says this kind of snapshot fossilization could only happen with a super fast burial, like in a massive flood.
I could see how that image would be pretty powerful, especially if you're already leaning toward creationism.
It is powerful. But it's key to remember, one dramatic story, it doesn't necessarily mean scientific proof,
Right.
But this example does show us how they think, the types of evidence they use to support this view.
It's a good reminder that the same evidence can be interpreted in totally different ways.
Absolutely.
Speaking of different interpretations, let's rewind a bit. Back to the 1800s, Charles Darwin setting sail on the HMS Beacon.
Ah, Darwin.
What can you tell us about his famous voyage and how it shaped how we understand evolution?
Oh, Darwin's voyage, that was a huge turning point in science. His observations, especially in the Galapagos Islands, those were the foundation for his theory of evolution by natural selection.
The Galapagos, those islands are famous for their, one-of-a-kind wildlife, right?
Oh, absolutely. In the documentary about Darwin, they talk about his fascination with the finches he saw there.
Okay.
He noticed that even though the finches on different islands were related, their beaks were different. Like they were adapted to the specific foods on each island.
So he's seeing these little variations, adaptations, and that gets him thinking.
Exactly, and that's where natural selection comes in. Imagine you've got finches, some have bigger beaks, some smaller, right?
Okay.
On an island with tough seeds, the ones with bigger, stronger beaks, they have an advantage.
Oh, I see.
They survive, reproduce, pass those big beak genes on.
And over time, the whole population shifts towards bigger beaks.
Yeah, like nature is doing its own experiments.
That's a cool way to think about it. It's not like a plan. It's this constant back and forth between the variations and what the environment throws at them, right?
Right, leading to slow, gradual change over many generations.
And Darwin didn't stop there, right? He proposed this whole tree of life idea. Everything descended from a common ancestor.
He did. He even said, what you see is a continuity of life on the planet. We're just a twig on a giant evolutionary tree that includes everything.
Wow.
He saw every species, us included, as interconnected branches going back billions of years.
So we have 2 very different origin stories. Creationism, with its 6-day creation and global flood, and evolution, with its billions of years and gradual change and this mind-blowing tree of life.
And that difference, how we see the very beginning of life, that's the heart of the conflict, science versus religion.
And those 2 coexist.
That's the million-dollar question.
It sparks so many debates.
Oh, it has. And in these videos, you see a bunch of different views on this. Some creationists see evolution as a direct attack on their faith. Like it goes against how they understand the Bible.
And then there are those who see attempts to put creationism into science class as forcing religion into science.
Right, exactly. And all this tension really blew up in Dover, Pennsylvania.
Dover.
Yeah. There was this school board meeting, it's in one of the documentaries, and it turned into a huge controversy because they wanted to use a book about intelligent design as an alternative to the regular biology textbooks.
So this wasn't just some theoretical debate, it got real and heated.
It did, and it ended up in the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial, which was a big deal. Everyone was watching. It put the spotlighting this question, is intelligent design actually science, or is it religion trying to look like science?
So what is the intelligent design argument?
The main idea is certain biological systems, they're just too complex, too intricate to have evolved slowly, gradually.
Okay.
They say these systems had to be designed by like an intelligent agent, a designer.
Like the bacterial flagellum, right? That
Yeah.
little tail thing that helps bacteria swim around.
Yes. Michael Behe, he's a big name in intelligent design. He uses that example a lot, the bacterial flagellum.
Okay.
He compares it to like a complicated outboard motor.
Okay.
He says its structure is just too intricate. It has to be design, not evolution.
It's a pretty convincing visual when you see those diagrams of it.
Oh, yeah. But there are strong counter-arguments, like Kenneth Miller, he uses a really clever analogy. He talks about a mousetrap.
A mousetrap?
Yeah, a mousetrap, it needs all its parts to work, right? Take one away and it's useless.
Yeah.
But Miller says some of those individual parts, they could have other uses on their own.
Like the spring could be used for something else entirely.
Exactly. So maybe complex systems don't have to like appear all at once, fully formed.
Right.
Maybe parts of the system evolved for different reasons, and then through evolution, they ended up working together in this new way.
So the bacterial flagellum, maybe it wasn't always for swimming, maybe the parts did other things, and then random mutations, natural collection, they came together in this new way.
That's the idea. Even systems that look irreducible, they can still have an evolutionary history.
It's like looking at a finished puzzle and thinking all the pieces were always meant to be there, but maybe they were part of different pictures before.
Perfect analogy.
It shows us that life's history, it's full of these unexpected twists and turns.
It is.
Okay, so we talked about complexity, but what about genetics? Has that given us evidence for evolution or against creationism?
Oh, genetics. That's a fascinating piece of all this. Remember, Darwin didn't know anything about genetics, but it's given us so much insight into how traits are passed down and how they can change, a mechanism for evolution.
You mean like DNA mutations, those random changes?
Exactly. Those mutations, they're random, but sometimes they lead to good traits. And if those traits help an organism survive and have babies, guess what? They're more likely to spread.
Through natural selection. It's like those mutations are the building blocks, and natural selection is choosing the best ones, the ones that work.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the most convincing pieces of evidence for evolution, it comes from fossils. Like the Tiktaalik fossil, it's about 375 million years old.
Tiktaalik? That sounds familiar.
It's called a missing link a lot of times because it has features of both fish and amphibians.
Okay.
Neil Shubin, he's one of the scientists who found Tiktaalik. He describes it as having fins, like a fish, but also amphibian stuff, like a neck, wrist bones, even primitive lungs.
So it's like a snapshot of evolution in the progress, showing a transition between two big groups of animals.
Exactly, and it's just one of many transitional fossils that back up the idea of gradual change over time.
Wow. So we've got these two big origin stories, but is there any middle ground at all? Can you believe in God and also accept evolution?
That's something so many people wrestle with, and our sources offer some really interesting perspectives on this. Like in the Science versus Religion documentary, there's this guy, Greg. He used to be a young Earth creationist.
Okay.
And he went on this trip organized by BioLogos.
Logos, what's that?
It's a group that promotes harmony between science and biblical faith. They believe God created the universe, and evolution is how he did it, how he brought about all the different life we see.
So they see evolution as a tool, not a contradiction.
Right, and for Greg, seeing the scientific evidence on this trip, it changed him. He even says to squish all of God's creative power into a 6,000 whatever framework is to tarnish his glory.
It sounds like the vastness of time that science shows us, it actually made his faith stronger.
That's how he describes it. But the documentary also shows the other creationists on the trip, and some were really resistant to the evidence.
Really?
Yeah, it seemed like they were more focused on defending what they already believed, even when they were shown things that challenged those beliefs.
It's amazing how strongly people can hold on to their beliefs, even when there's evidence that seems to contradict them.
It is. It shows how hard it can be to try and reconcile faith and science, you know?
Right.
It reminds us that to even have these conversations, you need to be willing to listen, be open to different viewpoints, and accept that sometimes there aren't easy answers.
Well said. Okay, get ready for this. What if mathematics itself is evidence of God?
Okay, that's a new one. Tell me more.
In the video, Science Finds the Mind of God, there's this guy, Jason Lyle. He presents this argument.
Okay.
He suggests that math laws, they're conceptual, universal, unchanging. They point to a divine mind behind them.
So the universe is fundamentally mathematical, like math is the language of reality.
Right. He even talks about the Mandelbrot set. Remember that crazy fractal?
Yeah.
Lyle asks, why do fractals occur both in math, which exists in the mind, and in the physical world?
So maybe the physical world reflects a deeper mathematical reality.
It's like that old idea, as above, so below. The patterns in nature are reflections of a bigger cosmic order.
That's fascinating.
So we've looked at two totally different ways of understanding how life began, and it's clear there's no simple answer.
Definitely not.
We've got creationism, evolution, intelligent design, even mass as a possible reflection of the divine.
I think what matters is approaching these questions with curiosity and an open mind.
Yeah.
It's not about finding the one right answer. It's about the journey, exploring different ideas, and maybe finding your own understanding of where you fit in this huge cosmic story.
And maybe that journey, the questioning and searching, that's just as important as any answer we might find.
I think you're right about that. It really is. And that reminds me, we haven't talked about the idea that evolution is just, too improbable.
Too improbable to have happened just by chance. Like, how does life even start from non-living stuff? That seems like a huge jump.
Yeah, it's a common question, and the origin of life, well, it's still a big mystery for science.
Okay.
No one has the answer yet, but scientists are looking at different ideas.
Like what?
Like the classic primordial soup, or newer ideas about hydrothermal vents, or even RNA being the first building block of life.
So no Frankenstein monsters in the lab yet.
Not quite, but here's the thing. Even if life starting was a 1 in a billion chance, once it happened, evolution could take over, shaping and changing life into everything we see.
It's like rolling those dice and hitting some crazy combination, but once you do, the game's on.
Exactly. And I got to think about the sheer scale of time. We're talking billions of years.
Billions of years. It's hard to even imagine.
It is. It's huge. That's loads of time for those gradual changes to build up.
Okay, but what about the argument that we don't actually see evolution happening?
The old, if we came from monkeys, why aren't they turning into humans now?
Right, right.
It's a misunderstanding of how evolution works.
So no Shakespeare writing chips anytime soon.
Probably not. Evolution isn't like a batter. It's more like a tree with different branches going in different directions.
Okay.
And those changes happen over long periods, thousands, millions of years even.
But haven't scientists seen evolution happen? Like with bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Antibiotic resistance, that's a classic example of evolution in action.
Right.
Bacteria reproduce so fast, they can evolve super quick. The ones that aren't killed by antibiotics, they survive, they multiply, and pretty soon you've got a whole population of resistant bacteria.
It's evolution right in front of us. Pretty sobering when you think about it.
It is. Shows how important it is to use antibiotics carefully.
Definitely. Okay, switching gears to creationism for a sec. One argument I hear is that the universe is just too ordered, too complex to have happened randomly.
The watchmaker argument, right. A complex watch needs a watchmaker, so a complex universe needs a designer.
But doesn't Darwin's natural selection offer a way for complexity to build up without a designer?
It does. Natural selection, acting on those random variations, it can create more and more complex systems over time.
So it's like a blind sculptor, shaping and refining life over eons.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But if you accept evolution, does that automatically mean no God?
That's a deeply personal question, and there's no single answer.
Right.
Some people see evolution as completely incompatible with their faith. Others don't see a conflict at all. They think evolution is God's way of working through natural laws.
So it's like seeing evolution as part of a bigger plan, maybe even evidence of God's power.
Exactly. For some, the vastness of the universe makes their faith even stronger, Others find comfort in the idea that God started things off and let the universe run by itself.
So there's room for different perspectives.
There is.
What about the idea that some events in the Bible, like the flood, were real, but maybe we're interpreting them wrong?
That's the scientific creationism view. They're trying to match up what science tells us with a literal reading of the Bible. Like, they might say the Grand Canyon was made by a flood, but maybe not a global flood, like in Genesis.
Maybe a huge flood in that area, maybe even something connected to the Ice Age ending.
Yeah, exactly. They look for scientific evidence that fits with the Bible. But here's a question that gets me. If the Earth is billions of years old, like science says, how do we explain Genesis, which seems to say it's much younger?
That's a tough one.
It is. It's a central problem for people trying to reconcile faith and science. Some people say the days in Genesis, they weren't literal 24-hour days. They were vast periods of time.
So each day could be millions, even billions of years.
Right. That lets the Earth be much older while still having a divine creation. Going back to intelligent design, we talked about the bacterial flagellum, but what other evidence do they use?
They talk about the fine-tuning of the universe a lot.
Right.
They say the laws of physics, like gravity or the speed of light, seem perfectly set up for life to exist.
It's like winning the cosmic lottery with even crazier odds.
Right. But aren't there arguments against that fine-tuning idea?
There are. Some physicists say that fine-tuning might just be an illusion.
Okay.
They talk about a multiverse, where there are loads of universes, each with its own laws.
So it's not that our universe is special. It's just that we happen to be in one that allows for life.
Exactly. It's a pretty mind-blowing concept, but it could explain the fine-tuning without a designer.
Multiverse, another one to add to the list of things to think about. This whole debate, it makes you think about human nature, If we evolved from primates, does that mean we're just selfish? driven by instincts?
That's a huge question, and it's caused a lot of debate. Some people say our evolutionary past makes us prone to things like aggression or competing for resources.
Survival with the fittest, yeah. But humans can also be incredibly selfless, compassionate, and cooperative.
You're right. Human behavior is way too complex to just be instincts. It's shaped by tons of things, genes, how we're raised, culture, our own choices.
So it's innate or nurture, both together.
Exactly. And that's why humans have come up with so many different moral and ethical systems.
Right.
We're capable of amazing things and terrible things.
Okay, this has always bugged me. If creationism is true, why are there so many different ways people interpret Genesis? Even in Christianity, there are all sorts of beliefs about how creation happened.
That's a great point, and it shows how hard it is to understand ancient texts. The Bible, like any sacred text, can be interpreted in different ways.
Right.
Even in the same religion, you'll find different viewpoints.
So some Christians believe in a literal six-day creation. Others say the days are metaphors, and others embrace theistic evolution.
Exactly. It shows that even within faith, there's room for nuance, discussion, different perspectives.
It seems like the more we explore this topic, the more layers we find.
It's true.
It's not just science versus religion. It's about how we read old texts, our place in the universe, even what consciousness is.
You got it. This debate makes us face huge questions about who we are, where we come from, what it even means to be human in this massive, mysterious universe.
It makes you realize how much is still out there, all this stuff we don't know.
It's humbling, for sure.
Speaking of big questions, we've been focused on life here on Earth, but what about life somewhere else? Like, if evolution is this universal thing, shouldn't we see it on other planets too?
That's a question that's been around forever, it seems like.
Right.
Scientists are definitely searching for that extraterrestrial life. They call it SETI.
SETI, okay.
And with all these exoplanets we're finding, planets orbiting other stars, well, finding life out there seems more and more possible.
It's mind-blowing to think about, other worlds, maybe with intelligent beings. It would change everything we think we know.
It would be huge, one of the biggest discoveries ever. And imagine if the life we found was totally different from anything here. Like, it didn't even fit with our ideas about biology.
Yeah, wow.
We'd have to rethink what life even means.
Okay, here's a thought. What if the intelligent designer isn't supernatural, but it's actually, like, super advanced aliens?
Whoa, now that's interesting. That's getting into some pretty wild territory.
Right.
But yeah, the idea of directed panspermia, like aliens planted life on Earth, some scientists and philosophers have talked about that.
So instead of God, it's these, like, cosmic gardeners spreading life through the galaxy. I like it.
It's a cool idea, for sure, but there's no evidence for it right now. It's just speculation.
Right.
But it makes you think, even if there was a designer, it doesn't have to be like a god,
It's like opening up the possibilities, thinking about things we never even considered.
Exactly.
Okay, last one. We've talked about how life began, but what about consciousness? How did we become these beings that can think about ourselves, ask all these big questions?
Consciousness, that's the biggest mystery of all. It's been puzzling everyone for centuries.
Yeah.
Some people say consciousness is just what happens when systems get really complex, like the brain.
Okay.
Like, as things get more complex, consciousness just pops up naturally. Others think it's a fundamental part of everything, maybe even part of the universe itself.
So we're back to those mind-blowing ideas, like math being the mind of God, everything being connected.
It's wild.
The more we learn, the more mysteries pop up.
And that's the beauty of it. This search for knowledge, it never ends.
There's always something new to discover, more questions to ask.
Exactly.
Well, there you have it, our deep dive into the creationism versus evolution debate. We've heard the arguments, looked at fossils, thought about genetics, and even explored some pretty out-there ideas about math, consciousness, and alien life.
It's been a journey, for sure, and like we saw, there are no easy answers.
But that's what makes it so interesting, this search for knowledge, the asking questions, the exploring. That's what matters. So keep those minds curious, and until next time, keep on exploring.